You're listening to the Electronic Media Collective Podcast Network. Yeah, it's a mouthful. For more great shows like the one you're about to enjoy, visit electronicmediacollective.com. And now, our feature presentation.
Greetings, classmates, and welcome back to the Movie Graveyard. We're just going to get right into it. We have a great, just epitome of what it means to be a cult 80s film tonight. We're going to be talking about, first of all, I'd like to thank my gravedigger friend here. The only way he would agree to be on this episode is I had to agree not to insult The Last Jedi anymore, so I'm not going to be doing that. So, once again, welcome, the gravedigger, Trev 3K. Trev, what's going on, man?
What's going on, Goat? School is out for summer, but class is just starting to get into session here, so.
That's right. And everybody, you know me, I am the GOAT. And I agreed to be on my own podcast as long as Trev didn't make fun of Justice League anymore, so.
I know, we're both going to have to bite our tongue a lot tonight, I think.
I know. But we are rolling on with this film, The Class of 1984. It's the first in basically a trilogy, but really there's only two films. I would say they're legit. Even in the two films, there's really this film, and then the sequel kind of stands alone. So,
we'll talk about that when we get to it. But sequel might even be quite the liberal term in this case.
More just like a similar film made by the same director, kind of. Mm. But anyway, we're gonna get rolling here. This film has been released on DVD and on Blu-ray, and there's a slight difference with a title card at the beginning of like a producer's film group or something. If you have the DVD, that card is not there. On the Blu-ray, it plays for like 8 seconds. So we're just going to go ahead and skip. If you have the DVD, you will be on the 1 second mark. If you have the Blu-ray, like I do, you will be on the 9 second mark. So I'm just, because it's going to go pretty quick, I'm just going to read this before we get it started. What we're starting on here is a screen that should say, last year there was 280,000 incidents of violence by students against teachers and their classmates in American high schools. Unfortunately, this film is based on true events. Fortunately, very few schools are like Lincoln High yet. So that's what the very first thing you'll see.
Great opening text too.
Yeah. So everybody
forget Star Wars scrolls. This is where it's at. Man.
Well, you know what I like about this too? This shit don't come on the screen all slow like Star Wars. It don't keep you into it. The movie starts and all the text is on there.
I'm just always a fan too of like exploitation films that start with text like this, being like, "Hey, by the way, this is true, man.
Yeah,
this
motherfucker. You could walk.
This is some reefer madness bullshit, you know."
Exactly. So that's literally the first thing that's in the movie. Grab your DVD remote here. Wake up your DVD players. I want to say 1, 2, 3, go. And when I say go, hit play on your remote. You got your remote in hand, Trev?
I do indeed.
All right, everybody. 1, 2, 3, go. All right. Here we go.
Now, I'm going to apologize right off the bat if there's a little more like volume than we normally have on this show. It's because I'm, for the first time ever, playing my movie with a little bit of volume on it because I am rocking off of the Anchor Bay DVD from years ago, which does not have subtitles.
Very unfortunate. Yeah. I have the subtitles on the Blu-ray, so I'll be good.
Plus,
there.
I really wanted to hear this Alice Cooper song.
Yeah, it's great. Years ago, me and Corey G actually reviewed this film for the Vault of Mysterious Information, and we got into a huge debate about the Class of 1984 theme song, I Love It, by Alice Cooper. Corey tried to say it wasn't punk enough, but I don't think it's trying to be punk. It's meant to be a slow and soft song with some ominous lyrics warning you of what's about to come. It's not really trying to be all in your face. You know, this isn't trying to, even though there is punk rock music in it, and the gang is portrayed as some punks, it's not trying to be a punk rock music movie, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's got the great lyrics about when to... Kind of starts out, and I think this is intentionally... This song was written by the great Lalo Schifrin, I think. And they got Alice Cooper to sing it. And it starts out with like some opening chords, sort of a synthesizer. Kind of reminds me of Clockwork Orange score, but then it goes into a more traditional kind of ballad song about, you know, when does a dream become a nightmare, and you know, all this. And and I don't know which came first, the script or the song, but there is some, the catchphrases of the movie, so to speak, are kind of in the theme song too, which I think that's always good when you kind of work that kind of level of integration of the theme song in with the script, you know.
We just had one of those great moments that I love from films where during the opening montage, one of the shots was like in slow-mo for a little bit before going into regular, because you could tell they just didn't time it well in editing, so they had to fix it. Yeah.
Yeah, like basically the movie starts with this new teacher at the school, Perry King, driving through the ghetto to get to the school he's teaching at, and he just sees people getting mugged on the streets. Like, this is a bad neighborhood, so the school's going to be bad too. And yeah, that slow motion shot, it was like a teacher or something, faculty sign, and they spray painted it, I believe, to say faculty. Is that what they did?
Yep.
Yep. Music by Lalo Schifrin, performed by Alice Cooper. And this movie, it's from the director. His name is Mark L. Lester, and he got basically inspired by. He went back to his old high school years later after he graduated, and when he went there, it was like a real nice school, like no violence, and the school had completely turned bad and like gang infected and shit. So that's what made him want to do this movie. And what's interesting was he had a couple different guys go through passes on the script, but I think the second or third pass was actually by Tom Holland.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I don't know, this is probably just one of those contractual things or whatever, but the one that pops up in the opening credits says story by Tom Holland.
Right.
Although every other bit of information, including Lester's audio commentary in the documentary, says that the story was always his and that Holland was just one of the writers that came on and worked on the script. So I don't know how Holland got that credit added on, but...
Yeah, I don't know. Because when you watch the documentary that's on the Blu-ray, I think, yeah, that was the doc I watched the other night. Like he really is like specific about, I came up with this, and then this guy brought this, and blah, blah, blah. And like he kind of does downplay the Tom Holland angle, which is funny because, as we open up here, Perry King plays the new teacher. He meets, a guy who's been teaching at the school for a while, knows what's up, played by Roddy McDowall. And I just always figured that's where kind of Holland, got the itch to put Roddy McDowall in Fright Night like a few years after this, but according to what Lester says, I don't think Tom Holland was really even around during the filming of this. And it's kind of funny that like we're just now talking about should we put should we put metal detectors, and like literally the movie opens up with like them basically sneaking knives past this metal detectors at school.
This is probably the most like socially relevant episode of Graveyard we've ever done.
Sadly it is.
Sadly it is, right? And I mean, this movie just recently, I'm sure you saw too, with some recent events. Yeah. I suddenly saw this movie being referenced a lot online, with a lot of pictures being posted of a particular scene coming up later, but I'm sure we'll talk about it when we get there. But Lester, even on the commentary and in the documentary, will if you want to know how much this film is like prescient and how much it kind of foresaw what was to come, just ask Mark Lester. He'll tell you all about it, because he's very proud of himself.
Oh yeah,
and, but he's not wrong, but I mean, it is that kind of thing of it might go a little overboard, and I don't know if it ever got quite as bad as he seems to think it did, but he definitely saw some things coming in terms of school violence and guns in school and stuff like that.
Well, the thing I think is really interesting is there definitely is like a security aspect to the school, like surveillance and stuff. Which I was surprised, because I know this wasn't commonplace then, but you constantly have the principal watching like these closed circuit monitors or whatever. And then like you really have to look though, like there's not like a lot of ominous shots of like cameras spanning the hallways or anything. Like they kind of put these fakey like multi-directional cameras hanging from the ceiling, and like that's really the only futuristic touch that they put on this movie is the cameras in the hallway. But they never really like you kind of have to go out of your way to notice them, or else you might just think they were like fire sprinklers or something. Yeah,
it's funny you say that too, because it took me like actually quite a while to see this movie. I didn't see it really early on when I was a kid. I just kind of came to it later in life, and I always thought it was like a futuristic movie. Now I clearly know I was just confusing it with the sequel.
Right.
But something about the title and something about like the cover image of them, the way they were dressed, the punk gang, I just thought it was like kind of a Mad Max-ish kind of film. But I forgot that all 80s movie punks dressed like that. And that's actually... I'm going to talk about that a lot during this movie, because one of my favorite things in movies, and especially 80 movies, is 80s punks. Oh, and this movie, in terms like, anything else Lester was prescient about, you can say it still falls into that old trope that I love of clearly an old man who's just afraid of the youth of today, making a movie about how horrible teenagers are. And that depiction of punks and punk rockers that was prevalent in 80s films just always tickles me.
Yeah. Like, here we have the teacher, Mr. Norris, played by Perry King. He comes in, It's kind of like your typical like hijinks classroom, like spitballs flying everywhere. Some kids they're getting bullied, but it's not like brutal bullying. Like it looks more just like they're playing like whatever, keep away with some kid's lunch. But then he starts realizing like, you know, that there's a handful of kids that are kind of doing all the like the shit stirring in this room, you know. Mm-hmm. But we got to get into a little bit here of the casting. They showed like kind of like the dweeb, not even the nerd, but like the dweeb of the school. They showed him briefly. It was played by Michael J. Fox.
Mm-hmm. Michael Fox, as he's credited here.
Yeah, Michael Fox. And I heard the story that he was like so broke. Like this was actually shot in Canada, but the way some of the cast makes it sound like, I don't know. There's like a lot of conflicting things whether he was or wasn't already shooting Family Ties at the time. I mean, if it was, must have been like very early in the process.
Yeah.
But yeah, he looks totally different. Like he's a little pudgier. I mean, Michael J. Fox is always short, but he looks even shorter in this movie. And
well, I mean, he's really young here too.
Yeah. So. Just to describe the gang, you have like a big kind of overweight guy who's like the brute. Then you kind of have like almost like a skinny jock type guy who really does all the majority of like the beatings and stuff. Then you have like kind of like a sexy punk girl. And then you have like a guy who's just a complete like Sid Vicious type heroin junkie.
Yeah, like a burnout, yeah.
Yeah. And then you have the leader, Stegman, who really is like, he dresses in like, I don't even think Stegman dresses punk as much as he dresses.
No, he's got like more new wave.
New wave, yeah, because his clothes are like too nice, whereas everybody else is like got shit held together by safety pins.
Let's mean on the cover, you probably know the famous cover or poster image I'm talking about. They even tried to, they put like metal spikes on his shoulder pads and stuff, which he does not have, but trying to make it look a little bit more Mad Max-ish. Or, yeah.
And they put like kind of the jock guy as having like a big rainbow mohawk that he never had either. But yeah, interesting. But I guess that's how you got to sell it, you know, if you have a low budget movie. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so basically the teacher just tried to call a roll call, and the bullies weren't supposed to be, or at least the majority of them weren't supposed to be in the class, so he kicked them out.
Yeah, and Stegman was, but they just the rest of them were just his gang, and they follow him everywhere.
Which that seems like very lame as a gang. Like you just got to follow one guy around all the time.
Yeah, can we just go to his classes? Like, wow, what a great day.
Now I will say, even though this is supposed to be a very grimy, spray painted school, like you do have to notice, I think there's a little bit of like casting in it, because throughout this movie there's plenty of large chested young women in tight shirts who walk by the camera. I don't know if you've ever noticed that or not.
What I like about this scene, though, is so when I've been showing recently, I've been showing people the sequel because I just fell in love with the sequel, and I've been kind of interested in that. And like you said, it's a standalone, so you can just kind of show them that. And then I often tell them about how, yeah, well, actually, this is kind of a sequel to another movie, Class of 1984, but you wouldn't believe it because that one's so much more grounded. Uh-huh. And then you think about this film gets kind of ridiculous, and it's not necessarily amazingly grounded. But what I do like here is that you see, you know, once those kids are out of the class, this isn't a school that's been completely taken over by violence or anything. There really is just kind of a bad element to the school.
Yeah.
And a lot of these kids are pretty normal and are just trying to look with everything. They like sticks, judging by that one kid's shirt back there.
Yeah, not everybody's like super edgy in the school.
Yeah, so it's not like, you know, the common cliche after this, which even the sequel would take part in, is the schools would just be completely out of control.
Yeah.
And here it's more just like, no, there's just a bad element kind of infesting it. But everyone's really just trying to get along to go along here.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like what's really like, the school is just like literally every inch of this school they covered in graffiti for this movie, which I'm shocked. Like, I'm surprised they had the budget to clean all this shit up afterwards. Like,
do you know the story about that?
No, no, I didn't. Please tell me about it.
The graffiti, because they filmed this at a school over the summer, obviously, and the graffiti did not come off as well as they thought it would. So when the school came back for the fall, a lot of the graffiti was still visible, and the school was pretty upset about it, and they had to come back and like spend more time taking it off, because for the first few days, kids were coming to school with all this like horrible graffiti all over the walls.
It's everywhere, dude. Like, it's insanely everywhere. You know what I mean? Like, the whole school looks like a toilet. But yeah, like, you never really see that the school's bad except for this gang. And then, like, you see this one black kid selling drugs who turns out he's in a gang as well. But other than those two gangs, you never really get the feeling that everybody's doing bad shit in the school. You have like the thing, they're beating this guy up because they were selling drugs on their turf and all that.
There's sometimes I just like to look around at the graffiti because there's some interesting graffiti. Like there in the background, we see one. This is "Liberate Armenia."
Yeah,
so like a political statement, and then also just Sabu, which I like to imagine Sabu from ECW just came in. And
Zarky. Another film that is insanely graffitied in the same vein is, but it took place at a place that was already closed down. Was Dead End Drive-In.
Dead End Drive-In's awesome.
Yeah, I actually just watched it like a week ago.
Ryan Trenchard Smith.
I know. Yeah.
That's probably good. The fact that we just mentioned him, probably a good time to mention Mark Lester, because if anyone recognizes that name but isn't exactly sure, it's because if you're like us, you probably watched Commando 300 times as a kid. And Mark Lester is also the director of that film.
Yeah, which I think he had to have kind of get leapfrogged because of the success of this movie. Because what happened with this movie was, believe it or not, like, it wasn't that the distributors thought this movie was bad. They thought it was too shocking, so they didn't want to put it out. So, like, the story that Mark Lester tells was there was, like, basically everybody passed on because they thought it was going to get, like, an NC-17 and all this shit. And they also thought like the actual theaters wouldn't want to play it because it'd be too much of a risk. Because I don't know if you remember, just to put the time period in context too. Like this movie's called Class of 1984, but it actually released in the year 1982. So it was still the early 80s, and there was a lot of problems and gang problems when they did The Warriors, which I think was like 79 or 80, somewhere around there.
Well, this was clearly a movie to be shown in like grindhouse kind of exploitation theaters too, and this was especially in the early 80s was when those were getting really dangerous to go to in like places like New York, and you really were taking your like kind of life in your own hands if you wanted to go see a film at those theaters. So 42nd Street was not the place to be for safety or for protecting your wallet.
No, not at all. So basically the way Mark Lester told it was Warner Brothers was like, listen, we like the movie. We'll put the movie out, but you got to have the theaters to commit to show it because, like, we just don't think they're going to show it because all the problems that could happen. So he went to a guy who owned, booked like a huge, maybe like the way he told it was like about a third of the theaters in the country at the time, and I'm blanking on the guy's name. I can't remember if it was the guy who ran like United Artists Theaters or maybe it was another theater chain. But basically, he screened it for the guy in the guy's basement. The guy was rich, he had a screening room, and the guy said, "Great, like let's do it." And the guy was like, Mark Lester was like, "Okay, Warner, that's great. If I can get like a contract, then I can show it to Warner Brothers." And be like, to show them that, hey, we can put the movie out. And the guy said, "Are you crazy? Like, what? You don't need Warner Brothers. Like, I'm booking the movie with you right now." And Mark Lester was like, "Okay, like, when are we going to do this?" And the guy was like, "I want it in theaters in 3 weeks." So they kind of did like a platform release. I think they did New York first. And they said it made tons of money. So Mark Lester literally, he kind of became the distributor as well. I think he made a lot of money on this movie,
Whatever. Yeah, this movie did do really well financially.
Yeah. So I think that's definitely what, leapfrogged his career and all that. Because he had done a couple things before this, but nothing that was really too big.
Well, he followed this up with Firestarter.
Right.
He has a really good run in that time period. Because, Firestarter is not great, but it's an interesting film. And then you have Commando, which is great. And then he follows it with Armed and Dangerous, which is a really good comedy.
Yeah, actually, I think, he's definitely in the B movie realm, don't get me wrong, but I think he, as far as those type of guys for like the early to mid 80s, I think he pretty versatile as a director.
Well, and I just saw someone on Twitter, it might have been Elric Kane or somebody, like maybe he retweeted it, but making the point of guys like, Mark Lester kind of falls into that category of guys like Jack Hill and directors like that who are kind of B directors or are B directors, but kind of have a concept of how to flow action and everything that it rivals like the bigger directors. They just never got that break,
Right. Yeah, it was funny that when the teacher came out, because, he got into the altercation with the gang. He came out after his first day at the school, and his car was all graffitied, spray painted. And he came home and he told his wife, "Can you believe I had to pay $40 to get this graffiti removed from the car?" Like, what body shop is taking that much graffiti off for $40? Even in 1982 dollars, I want to know.
Now, have you seen any of Lester's earlier exploitation films, like Truck Stop Women or Bobby Joe and the Outlaw?
No, I had. I just basically the only thing I know about him was just him, like basically barely mentioning him on the documentary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'll actually get to see a little bit of Bobby Joe and the Outlaw later in this movie. That's a great.
That was the movie Stegman's watching on the TV.
Yeah, with Linda Carter. Yeah,
I was wondering, and I thought that was Linda Carter.
Primarily known for like a lengthy nude scene with Linda Carter.
Okay, yeah, I've always heard about that movie. I just didn't know the title or that who made it. Now, I think this right here is kind of, wouldn't you agree? Is kind of maybe the most Clockwork Orange that this movie tries to get with the fight between the gang of black kids. I can't remember if they had actually none of the gangs have gang names in this, from what I remember.
No, yeah.
But yeah, they get retribution for Stegman and those guys beating up one of their gang members. So. I find this kind of interesting. I guess it was just a way to wrap up that scene. But the cops come like right away for this gang brawl that's like underneath basically a freeway. Mm-hmm. Who called them? How'd they get there that fast?
I think that scene too is kind of the scene we we're just talking about. Why that scene's in there? The Clockwork Orange influence for sure. Lester said that's probably his favorite film. And then I think also, like you said, this is also coming off of The Warriors.
Yeah.
What year was The Wanderers? Because I feel like maybe even,
I could be wrong, but I want to say that was like 81. So that was like...
Yeah, right, so again, I think he's probably trying, movies about gangs fighting are popular. I better have a scene of that.
Yeah, because the rest of the movie now, we're only about 15 minutes in the movie. The rest of the movie is all pretty much the gang focusing now, just on the teacher. Like, you don't get too much... There is one scene where you kind of see how their business runs at this punk club that they go to, but other than that, it's mostly them fighting with the teacher. Yeah,
it's interesting, because they really do target him from this point on. You wonder, is this the first time an adult has stood up to them? Even because all they did was basically kick them out of one class, and it's like, man, they really took it hard because it's just war now.
Like now they basically roll up, and it does kind of start as pranks. Like first they spray paint his car, now they go in front of his house, and him and his wife have to be coming home from dinner or something. And they spray, basically with a water gun, they pull up and they spray fake blood in his eyes.
Mm-hmm. Now, so that's never said in the film what city this is taking place in, but like I said, it was filmed in Toronto, and we just saw them driving down Yonge Street, which is kind of the main street of Toronto, which is very much a 42nd Street-ish kind of street. I don't know what it's like now, but I mean, I went there in the early 2000s, and that's kind of the closest I feel I'll ever get to getting to walk down the old school 42nd Street, because it still had that look with the bright marquees and kind of still that kind of slightly seedy kind of feel. So everything it looks like here in the film is still how it looks, or it's still how it looked when I was there, and I just remember kind of loving it, because it just I always love cities that look like that in films.
Yeah, I went to Toronto, my only real Canadian trip. I went to Toronto 91. I was pretty young to see a baseball all-star game up there. Mm-hmm. And Toronto's, I think in a way, Toronto kind of looks better on film than New York does in a lot of movies, because it kind of has somewhat of a New York feel. It's a huge city. It's impressive how big it is. But there's just something about it, the architecture, it's similar, but it's just slightly different. But yeah, I know what you're talking about.
That band Teenage Head still playing today, still an active band.
Yeah, the girl who plays the punk girl in the gang, she said she didn't want to be in that slam dancing scene, because the real punk girls, the extras, they were out to get her or whatever. So she really went out of her way not to be in there. So
those were all, because all those extras were people they just found at a real club like that, and they just told them really just go wild. And they said the guy actors got into it, like Timothy Van Patten and them, they loved it. But I can see her being like, "Whoa, what am I doing here?"
Yeah, because I guess apparently because her clothing was designed by the movie or whatever, is a little more stylized than what the punk girls, especially with the colors. She said a lot of the real punk girls just wore black and white at the time period, and she said they were out to get her, pretty much calling her a poser, which is ridiculous, because she's actually just an actress. She in real life she was nowhere near this type of scene or whatever. But I think definitely if you watch a lot of the Sex Pistols documentaries and see what the girls were dressing in the late 70s in England, around the punk scene there, especially this girl with this kind of weird mohawk beehive, Like, a lot of the fashion reminds me of that the girls have.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have this, like I said earlier, I have this obsession with movies of this time that would depict punks, and you'd look at it, and sometimes you really laugh, and you think it's really extreme, and then sometimes you will go watch something like The Filth and the Fury or whatever, and you see, like, well, no, there actually were people that were taking it that far.
Yeah.
I don't think they were the majority. You know, I think they were usually the exception to the rule, or some people would go really outlandish with the outfits, and then the people who make these movies just thought that that's what all punks looked like.
Right.
And they would just kind of push the boundaries of it. But yeah, there certainly were people wearing, you know, outfits like this and doing that kind of face makeup and stuff.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because like I read a lot of like, when was this? Would have been late '90s, around '98. I got really into Sex Pistols. You know, like a little bit after their reunion tour and stuff. And
still in the Sex Pistols. Never Mind the Bollocks, Here Comes the Sex Pistols is my favorite album of all time.
Really? That's interesting. Yeah, but like I read a lot of biographies and read a lot of, you know, saw a lot of documentary films and whatnot. It's kind of funny how small that scene actually was, but how much the style really, because when you really watch those things, a lot of times it's like the same roughly 40 people from the scene getting interviewed over and over and showing up in all the old
35
films.
of those people went on to form their own punk bands.
Exactly. So here's what I was talking about, the punk gang. We kind of see a little bit of their business in this like upper room at the punk club. And, like, there's a girl that wants to come work for them, which pretty much means prostituting or whatever. So she strips down naked, and this is kind of more the exploitation feel, this girl coming in. And I thought it was interesting because the girl who's actually in the punk gang, she's not, like, anybody's girlfriend. None of the guys try to have sex with her, like, nothing. I thought that was interesting. Cause
in fact, she seems quite turned on by the girl.
Right, which, I mean, that probably tells you what's going on. But I thought that was interesting that they went so far to show that the girl in the gang was kind of an equal to the guys, you know?
Yeah, I like that too. I really wish there were more scenes in that club or more of that depicting Stegman as kind of this like Godfather-esque character in this community.
And that's pretty much what Lester said, like why he did that scene, was they had to show some type of, you know, really where their power came from and how they...
Well, I know he also said that there was like an old film from the 40s or something called like High School Godfather or something, and he was trying to pay homage to that, of the idea of like a delinquent who's kind of controlling the drug trade in the school.
So I think, and here's the thing, I was like you, Trev, I came to this movie late, and I came to it after seeing the sequel. And unfortunately, the first time I saw this movie, because I never saw this movie like on VHS sitting in a rental store or anything. So the first time I saw this movie was on regular TV on a Sunday afternoon and edited. And I knew about the movie because I had Fangoria magazines that talked about when Class of 1999 came out, it referenced this movie. So when I caught it on TV, I knew exactly what it was. And I was really disappointed in it, but that was because I was watching the censored version. It wasn't until years later... And I can't remember exactly if it was when the Anchor Bay DVD came out or somewhere else. I either rented it or saw like the legit version on cable, and I got into it a little more. And every time I watched it, I got more and more. And I gotta say, for me, the thing that really makes this movie good is Perry King as the teacher. Like, I think he does such a good job that it grounds it into being some legit drama and not just silly punk hijinks, you know what I mean?
I think I agree with you. I think for me it is a two-hander. I think it's Perry King, and I think it is Timothy Van Patten, who I think also does a really good job in this film, playing like, you know, you could look at him and say he's like the more cliched, kind of over-the-top character, but then this scene is the great subversion of it.
Right. I love this.
And I do want to say, like, in terms of story, Mr. Norris does make a strategic mistake here, I believe, which you can kind of say the rest of the film really does fall onto him. Because here it's revealed that for all his bluster and everything, Stegman, because we haven't even mentioned Norris as the music teacher,
right?
And he's putting together like a band to compete in like the regionals for all the high schools in the area, and we find out that Stegman is actually a piano prodigy, who's showing off his skills at this point. And what you realize in this scene is because they saw him kind of hovering at the door listening, and then, you know, kind of actually walking in and wanting to be there. Stegman really does want to be part of this, like he wants to in the band, and Norris just flat out tells him no now because of the early confrontation. I was just thinking, oops, that's not what you do. Instead you say, yeah, you can, but while you're here, you'll just have to follow some rules.
Yeah.
But by just instantly dismissing him, he does kind of set off everything that follows.
Well, to be fair, I think it's both, though, because Stegman, it was going to be his way or no way, because literally Perry King's kind of leaning in, and he was saying, you know, he takes the interest in him and be like, wow, like that's amazing. And Stegman just screams at him, do I get the fucking gig, teacher? So like right then was when Perry King was like, well, fuck you then. Like he just he jumped, like maybe he should have made a second attempt later on before things got escalated. But I still think Stegman was still gonna, you know, try to like. I just think the control factor was too much for Stegman. I don't think he would play his part in the band.
I do think it's, whatever way you look at it, it is a great character beat, and I think a lot of lesser writers or filmmakers wouldn't have that in there. The idea that Stegman actually has like this kind of talent, and he, you know, there's the idea that he maybe could be saved or could be something in the future if he could just get the right person to kind of like crack down on him, you know.
Well, he needs to stop being so immature is really what it is. And like I think that's also kind of a theme a little bit, is like from A Clockwork Orange, because like A Clockwork Orange, the book actually has Alex stop doing crimes eventually just because he gets bored with the whole thing. And I think that's where Stegman needed to go. He needed to get to a point where he just was bored, you know, but unfortunately he's still power tripping on showing adults up at this point, you know.
Yeah, and Stegman is definitely influenced by Alex. Again, Lester loving that film, and like I said, Alex also, of course, is like, you know, actually a genius and everything. Just that boredom with like regular society has allowed him to fall into this kind of gang lifestyle.
Yeah. And here's kind of like, I mean, I don't criticize it because I think it's still a good, you know, this is like exploitation movie, it needs it. But this is the only part, this scene reminds me so much of an after school special I saw about PCP with, I think, Helen Hunt in it. There's this, I should have looked it up to get the title, but I think it's Helen Hunt in this after school movie takes PCP and she thinks she can fly and she jumps off the roof of the building. And I was so curious which one came first, this movie or that movie. I'm thinking this movie probably came first, but this reminds me of his Michael J. Fox, his friend Jimmy, who I don't even think they say what sport he plays, but for some reason he wants to do angel dust because it's going to make him play better in the game later that day. And like he snorts this shit, and then Mr. Norris comes in and sees the drug deal kind of, you know, going on and tries to immediately bust Stegman and all that. But this is the only time, like I said, where it gets a little after school special-ish. And I think it was this scene, or at least that's the way they framed it on the documentary or whatever. But the one kind of like jock guy of the group, his wife was having a baby and they wouldn't let him leave. So it was a tough day of shooting, apparently.
There's some graffiti in the background that has to do with O.J. Simpson.
I saw that. I thought that was bizarre.
Is O.J. he a black man? Which I just thought was,
Yeah, like you kind of, they never really go into it. Like Stegman did use a racial slur earlier when he was beating up that black kid, but like they never go into it because they're really.
Well, they do the Nazi salute when they introduce themselves to Mr. Norris.
That is true.
They do the Zig Heil, yeah.
Yeah, and I want to say one of them at some point. I think the big guy, or maybe I'm wrong, but somebody has like a Nazi pin or something on their shit. But yeah, like I think it's subtle, the racial tensions at the school, but they don't really go into it too much.
Well, and the Nazi stuff really is coming off of just to go back to us talking about the London punk scene and everything. Like it was very common for the punks at that time to wear Nazi paraphernalia, and really, it's not a matter of racism necessarily. I'm sure some of them were, but I think for a lot of them, it was just a matter of what can we do to piss off adults.
Yeah, shock value. But I'm right here, Mr. Norris, because he has such a boner for catching Stegman in his game. He doesn't even notice that the Jimmy kid is like smacking his face and his face is going numb and shit from these drugs.
What do you think of, I guess now's a good time to talk about Timothy Van Patten.
Yeah, I was going to say that from a lot of the interviews from the actors, they said he wasn't real happy to be doing this. Because I guess he played a similar role on a TV show, and that's why they casted him.
Yeah, he was on White Shadow.
Yeah, White Shadow, and they said he was like furthest from the character. He was a super nice guy, and I guess he wanted to get out of acting and get into directing, right?
Mm-hmm. Which he did. You know, he doesn't stick around in acting very much longer after this. He had, I think, Master Ninja maybe followed this, the TV show that he was on with Lee Van Cleef for a little bit, but. Yeah, he's gone on to be a pretty prolific TV director. He's directed a lot of HBO stuff and things like that.
Yeah, he started with the HBO era with directing some of the episodes of The Sopranos. And then he went on to do some Boardwalk Empire, and because of the Boardwalk Empire stuff, he actually did the pilot of Game of Thrones. And I don't know if the pilots with cable stuff is the same as pilots with network stuff, but I know usually anybody who even just directs just the pilot usually gets a huge payday. And he's still working with HBO and doing other stuff, so he's pretty much one of the most in-demand television directors right now.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take a second to talk about the principal character. What do you think of the principal character?
He's the stock principal character, right? Yeah. The one who seems like, how did he get this job, and just does not want to deal with any actual problems that arise.
Right.
And for some reason never trusts the teacher who's clearly in the right.
Yeah, I know. Like, he straddles that line of like, oh, you have to see them do this, you have to see them. But it's like, come on, like, we know who's running the school. Like, I think a little bit of it, he's hiding behind the rules because he really doesn't want to piss off the gang. You know, like, he doesn't want, like, not just the gang, but just any bad students in the school. I don't think he wants the retribution to come back on him the way it comes back on Norris throughout the film.
Yeah.
And I will say this one guy that's in the gang who plays the druggy guy, he's a pretty distinctive looking guy. He actually, have you heard, oh shit, I'm blanking on the movie. Frank Lalogia, I think it's Hear No Evil or See No Evil. It's a movie I just blind bought on Anchor Bay DVD a long time ago. And the druggy guy plays this like Antichrist character in it who's like in high school. And he's like a bully nerd. And like, but he starts having psychic powers and starts screwing people up. And this movie is insane. Like, this is another one we'll have to cover for this show at some point in time, because basically the movie ends with like this Antichrist type high school character basically bringing on like a whole graveyard of zombies coming out. He resurrects them to, you know, with satanic powers to get them to attack a bunch of people in this New Jersey town. It was like an independent movie, but it's pretty damn ambitious.
I just want to quickly go back just a moment, because we were talking about Timothy Patton being one of the most in-demand TV directors. He also recently directed the Hang the DJ episode of Black Mirror, which I know is a very popular episode and one of the more talked about episodes of the recent run. So,
yeah, Hang the DJ, taken from the Smith song, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the name of that movie was Fear No Evil, and that came out the year before this did. So,
there's a great extra performance here, and by great I mean terrible.
Yeah.
So we just saw the jock kid, because he was high, he climbed up the flagpole, and the whole school came out to watch him, and he falls to his death. And there's one girl, unfortunately, left in the foreground who just does not react at all. Mm. Everyone else is like screaming and freaking out, as you would if you watched a kid plummet to his death. And she's actually just kind of got this smirk on her face. And I'm actually surprised Lester didn't notice that in editing and kind of try to work around that a little bit.
And like, I watched actually a couple of times that scene. Like, it's really good with, you know, the stunt double and then the close up of the guy up on the flagpole and stuff. It's actually a well done scene and stunt for the way they shoot.
The fact that he falls holding the flag and ends with the flag wrapped around him, maybe a little on the nose, but
yeah, Lester said that was intentional. So he was really going for his shock value on that one. Here's where we really start getting Michael Fox in the thing, because the teacher wants him to like tell who sold the drugs and all that. Like, you know, don't you see your friend's dead now and you won't say? Just give me the name and that. And obviously the punk gang notices this, so now they'll be putting pressure on Michael Fox as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, Norris keeps making mistakes. Like, now he just got Fox in like more trouble by doing that right in front of them.
Yeah.
Making everybody else's life harder on them.
It's really funny too, seeing the interviews and stuff. The two girls in this, the one in the punk gang, and then the girl who is in the band, the kind of we haven't really talked about, but she kind of is friends with Michael Fox here with the short hair. It's amazing how much these two ladies look very much the same now. Like, they look older, but even the girl with the short hair, she kind of has the same short hair now, and she's very distinctive. It looks the same, and you know, the punk girl is actually still very good looking, just like she is in this movie. Unfortunately, the kind of big brute guy in the gang He passed away like years ago at a young age. He just caught a strange case of brain cancer or what have you. Mm. But as far as I know, everybody else is doing pretty good from this. I think him, and obviously we all know Roddy McDowall passed away in the 90s. But other than that, I think everybody in this movie is still around.
Yeah.
Here we go. And I thought this was funny. Like they harass Michael Fox and this girl, throw him up against this like abandoned car that's all spray painted. But there's like a ski pole hanging out the car door. I thought that was funny.
So just use the ski pole instead of breaking that bottle. You have a weapon right there at the ready for you.
Yeah. I know this bottle stunt was a very hard to do, they say, because for some reason the director was very pissed at the prop people. Because they were saying like in Canada at this time, Canada actually wasn't used to doing like movies and people were inexperienced. So like, literally you do like a thing like that, like you're going to need multiple, takes, multiple whatever, just make sure it goes right, whatever. And they said they only brought like, the crew guy only bought like two, or I guess the prop master only bought 2 fake bottles to break. So there was a lot of pressure to like, would it break the right way and would they be able to use it and all that shit.
Now, I'm never one to tell people how to do their business, but if I could talk to Stegman for a moment and tell him how to run this gang, I want to point out that the one like jock guy who has like, he's got like these kind of python arms for a high schooler. Yeah. Really looks like probably the toughest member of the gang. Every time they're like threatening someone or in some kind of physical altercation, they just have him being the guard, like doing watchdog.
He's always a lookout.
Shouldn't he be the guy that's like roughing up your enemies?
Well, when they had the gang fight earlier, they went out of their way to show that guy was the best fighter, and like he was literally making up for everybody else who was kind of losing their fight. So he would beat up his guy, and then he would move on to help somebody. Because the druggy guy, he can't do much, and the girl, she's not going to be fighting people.
And here again is Norris, like he's doing the right thing, but he is wrong. Like you don't have any authority over the kids in an alley, So stepping into like, because they're threatening Michael J. Fox and his friend in the alley, and Norris sees that and steps in. And I mean, this isn't school grounds. He doesn't really have much of a say here.
No, he doesn't. I think it goes both ways. Though I think the gang is pretty like stupid to think that like, like he can't do anything in this situation. Like I think the smart thing was at this point just to play it off and let the kids go. But like they really get into it here, and Michael Fox and the girl, they kind of run away in the fracas, but they do attack the teachers because Roddy McDowall is with them, and they slash the little druggy guy slash Roddy McDowall with like a straight razor.
Yeah, and they punch Norris in the face.
Which that's where I could see them like not backing down to them, but I think that was very stupid because now they could easily go to the cops. Like Roddy McDowall's hands all slashed up. It's Norris got the bottle or something over his head. He's all bleeding too. But it just seems awkward because what are you going to do the next day when you see the teachers at school? You know what I mean?
Now, since we've been talking about punks or anything, let me just ask Goat, because it's a good time for this kind of deviation. You mentioned getting into the Sex Pistols. How much of did you have a big punk rock phase when you were younger? Or I feel like, a lot of people have that at some point. But
yeah, I want to say my punk rock phase was really around, it was mostly just getting into bands from soundtracks from movies. I want to say I got into it probably after high school. I'd say probably like around the age of 18, I got mostly into the movie Repo Man just as a movie, and then that soundtrack, kind of wore off, and then I got into Iggy Pop, which then kind of led me to get into the Sex Pistols. So I had a good 3-year run, and then a lot of people don't know this, but the one and only Phil D's Nuts is a huge punk rock fan with a large punk rock CD collection. So, I mean, and then the Misfits, got into the Misfits. So it really was a triage for me of Iggy Pop, then the Sex Pistols, and the Misfits. So, I mean, that was a good 3, 4. And then eventually just on my own, I got into Black Flag. So I had a good 5-year run of late teens, early 20s being into punk.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, because like we're not too dissimilar in age, but I was of that right age where, you know, when I was in high school is when Green Day and Offspring came on the scene and blew up big time, and you get into that, and then you know you're like, yeah, this is good punk music, right? And then somebody will always tell you like, well, by the way, that's not really punk, that's pop punk. If you want to really hear punk and what they're kind of referencing, listen to this. And then so as a teen, like I kind of was then dove in a little more, and I got into the Sex Pistols and went back and found bands like X and you know, even like the kind of more offshoot kind of stuff like Television. And then it's always mind blowing when you realize the first time you realize that punk, how wide ranging punk is, to where Blondie is punk, you know, and Talking Heads is punk, spread out, Elvis Costello and Patti Smith. And so, yeah, there's a whole world to discover. But I'm constantly, even still today, fascinated by that brief little scene you're talking about, the London punk scene of the time of the Sex Pistols and the Clash. I just find it so interesting and just I don't know, like it kind of makes me sad that kids today don't have that kind of rebellious streak to that end.
Yeah, now young kids now are more into just creating their own current thing and their own current scene. Whereas I think we're people who grew up really in the 90s, like us, I think really there was that thing of like getting in the stuff that was current, but also really looking at like where did it come from? You know what I mean? Like, because when I went to school, well, when I went to college, I'd say, and I didn't go to like a big metropolitan college. I went to pretty small college, but I'd say there was a good mix of like lots of people who were it wasn't just like everybody was just into hip hop or pop. There was actually a lot of people into punk or heavy metal still, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Just like, even though it wasn't really that trendy of a thing to do at the time. Yeah.
I do say it's surprised me, like one of the things I find most disappointing about millennials, and I'm not going to turn into that old guy bitching about millennials, but with the state of the world it's in, I'm surprised there hasn't been like more of a punk rock kind of movement to emerge from that age range. But you know what, if their punk rock movement is going to be organizing marches in Washington and starting kind of actual political battles, I guess that's pretty punk rock. So
it is. And I think a lot of I notice a lot of kind of the do-it-yourself, who cares if you know how to play your guitar or not. I've noticed that like really rubbed off even in electronic music like a lot. Because even pop music now is very electronic. There's a lot of people making hip-hop albums that like, they're really not skilled technically on a musical level, but you can tell they're just, they don't give a shit. They're just doing, to get their thing out there. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, but I do miss traditional punk as well. Just, I don't know, like it just, like I was saying, like the time period that I went to college, which at this point now is going on almost 20 years ago, I just think like there was the thing of like young people still, like it was cool to be into old stuff. And I don't know what changed, but it seems like kids are less now into looking in the past as they were, when we were growing up. Mm-hmm. Because like when I was even in high school, like kids were talking about old movies like Clockwork Orange and stuff, and I don't know if that goes on now or not. Yeah. Like there was a million music videos even up until the late 90s that were all Clockwork Orange derivative.
This probably comes back to something we've talked before about, and maybe on this show, I'm not sure, but the idea that every subsequent generation has more stuff in the past to look back on. True. So it gets a little tougher. There's more content vying for your attention. Yeah. So we get one of the more like gruesome kind of things in the film. So Roddy McDowell is kind of the science teacher of the school, and we saw earlier he has all these like kind of bunnies in the class, these rabbits that he really cares for that are kind of caged up. And now because he got involved in that altercation in the alley, they come to school the next morning to find that the gang has come in and skinned all those rabbits and kind of skewered them throughout the classroom, and there's blood all over the walls.
Yeah, and they even hung a cat, like literally there's a cat hanging from a noose. But yeah, it's very disturbing, I have to say, even, and especially because this being a low-budget movie, and this is kind of just what you did at the time. Roger Corman did this a lot, too. They literally just went to a local animal morgue and kind of disfigured the animal bodies. The animals were already dead when they got them, of course, but still, they literally made the dead animals props, and people said, obviously, it stunk really bad. And I have to say, Norris plays into Stegman's hand perfectly here. Like, he runs and pushes Stegman, in the bathroom, and everybody runs out, which perfectly leads up what Stegman's going to do next.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, it's kind of funny because this is, like, almost like a cliched scene in movies now. But according to Mark Lester, of course, because he invented everything, he said this was actually a lot more of a shocking turn to people at the time, that Stegman would, bash his own face into the mirror and on the sink to bloody himself, and, in order to blame Mr. Norris. And I have to say, like, it's just one of those things that's so coincidental or whatever, but it reminds me a lot of that scene in Fight Club when Edward Norton does the same thing.
Yeah. If nothing else, Stegman had a future as a professional wrestler. Could have gotten to, like, CZW or something.
I know. He could blade himself very easily and convincingly. But I almost think Stegman would have knocked his teeth out doing that shit. But yeah, he frames him perfectly. And then he, when the security guard runs in, he blames the teacher. He attacked me and all this shit. And just, yeah. I mean, I don't know. That's very tough. I don't know what, as a school, what you do in that situation. Because it's like, I could very easily see, them actually believing Stegman, or a kid like Stegman at this point,
Yeah. We should mention while we were talking about punk rock that we did see that Norris did go to the police, and of course we got that other trope of this kind of film, where the police just are like, nah, nothing we can do, we don't have the proof, and now that same cop is the one who comes to the school to deal with this, and same thing, right? They're like, yeah, I'm pretty sure you were telling the truth, but sorry, I gotta catch them red-handed.
And also,
because eventually we got to get the law going into our hero's own hands.
Yeah, because the law will not do anything. But also, too, like, really, the cop is like, they're juveniles. You can't do anything to juveniles. I mean, I don't know how true that is or not, but there's a big thing in movies and TV shows. They can't do anything to a juvenile. They can't do anything at all. But, like, I'm pretty sure you can lock juveniles. I mean, they have, like, juvenile detention centers and whatnot.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was really the card to play in the 80s in TV shows and movies and whatnot.
Well, again, it was just it's a generation that was so fearful of the youth, and this punk rock movement, satanic panic, of course, was a big deal in the 80s. So people were just terrified of what their teens were up to.
So, Trev, I got to ask you, because this is one tidbit I was not able to find out.
Here's Bobby Joe and the Outlaw, by the way. Is why do you think they called this movie Class of 1984 when it came out in 82? Do you think 1984 just with the George Orwell thing? Yeah, I think the 84 was an Orwell nod, but I also think I think they view it as a slightly futuristic film, right? I think Lester's just looking slightly ahead to saying, like, look, schools are bad right now, but this is how bad it's going to get if we don't do anything. And just put even a couple years. I kind of like the idea of saying this is the future, but it's not the far future. This might be what's right around the corner from us.
It's kind of like how Escape from New York took place in, like, 1997, I believe.
Yeah, it's like all these futuristic films, you watch them now and you wish, like, if I ever made a film set in the future, I'd set it in, like, the year, like, 50,000 or something, just so you don't have to deal with that kind of embarrassment of when you watch these movies now. Although I love that as a kitschy thing, when all these movies that predict a future that didn't happen.
Yeah, I just think, because I do remember a little bit the resurgence that the George Orwell story had in like, the actual year of 1984. I was very young.
Yeah, well, the movie was released.
Yeah, the movie came out. You had the Apple commercial. Like, 1984 was like a big deal all of a sudden, even though it was like a super old book.
Well, that's a book that kind of keeps coming back. I mean, it's been consistently popular, but also when Trump became president, it actually went to number 1 on the bestseller list again. And stayed there. Yeah, stayed there for a few months because a lot of people were talking about how his administration seemed very Orwellian. So,
yeah, I mean, it's kind of not come back as much recently, but another, like, book and story that kept coming back a lot throughout the 80s and even the 90s. There was even rumors of another remake. I remember Fahrenheit 451 kept coming up a lot.
Well, there actually is a new Fahrenheit 451 coming up later this year, starring Michael Shannon and Michael B. Jordan.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, HBO original.
Nice.
Yeah, it's gonna be an HBO movie, but it looks pretty good.
Now, here's the only scene in the entire movie where we get the glimpse of Stegman's real home life. I mean, it's in an apartment, but it's a very cushy apartment. I would go as far as say a rich person's apartment, kind of.
So we can see where the piano thing comes from, right? Because he's a rich kid, and clearly, this is the kind of family that he would have had piano lessons as a kid.
Yeah.
And you can get the sense that everything he does outside of this is a rebellion against this, but he also is totally playing his mom to where she thinks he's the great, mama's boy kind of, kid with no problems.
It's really actually disgusting to watch to see how much the mom defends him, I like the intercom game, like the mom walks out of the room and Stegman drops the nice guy act and he starts talking to shit to Norris, who's, perfect timing, by the way, that he knew Mr. Norris would be walking by the intercom.
Yeah, what if he had just got into a conversation with some other random person?
Yeah, that would be interesting too.
Then the rest of the movie is just about this random stranger messing with Stegman.
This is actually one of my favorite scenes of the movie, but I have to question whether Mr. Norris really knew how to hotwire a car or not. Because, what do you think? Remember how 80s movies, it was so common to hotwire cars in movies? Like, anybody could do it, literally. Here we go. Bashing in the...
I do like that now, the movie is just entering this realm, and I do like films like this that just become about an escalation of, two people just messing with each other, and I feel like it's kind of missed in modern, we don't get films of, just that kind of simplicity anymore.
Yeah.
But just two people who are dead set on screwing each other over, and it obviously gets worse and worse and escalates to, deadly consequences, but at this point it's just two people who are just screw you, I'm gonna, annoy you more, or...
Yeah, because we kind of glossed over it, but they did destroy Mr. Norris's car completely. They bashed it and put it a Molotov cocktail in it. So now he's bashing up Stegman's car. I
love that. I love the detail of him locking the door after he gets out.
I know, it's hilarious, even though the window's down and everything. Well, actually, the window's broken out, but yeah, it's even an insert shot when he goes and locks it. I really like that kind of opening, insert shot or whatever, establishing shot of the outside of the school. I don't know why it gets me every time. I like it. Here's Stegman, very pissed. But, the thing that I think is kind of interesting is if Stegman didn't have the gang behind him, I think his ego would have dropped enough to where him and Mr. Norris could have kind of got on the same page at some point.
I always sort of think that when I watched the film, this scene in particular, this could have been a moment where Norris could have, when he came in, if I was Norris, could have been almost like a reach out, well, we're not so different kind of thing, right? Yeah. Try that on him in that moment. Say we both did the same thing, and see if you can have any kind of connection.
Yeah. Yeah, I always wish the security guard, because for some reason Stegman then backs down when the security guard walks in. I guess because he doesn't want to blow his perception that Mr. Norris actually beat him up or something. But yeah. I always wish the guard wouldn't have came in and that scene would have played a little bit longer.
Yeah. Because what Stegman is doing here is he's just drawing out the same level of violence out of Norris. This is one of those kind of pacifist turned violent films that were all the rage at the time. And
this is definitely, I would say also... as much as a lot of Clockwork Orange influence, this is also influenced a lot by Straw Dogs, I'd say.
Yeah, Death Wish.
Yeah, Death Wish as well. Now here we have, they're just clearly trying to get somebody killed. And I think Michael Fox is also blamed, because Michael Fox stops to talk to the cop and Mr. Norris, and it makes it look like Michael Fox is squealing, but he's really not. He's just, like Mr. Norris should have known to hey, kind of beat it, see you later to Michael Fox. And Michael Fox shouldn't have been hanging around there either. He should have known that the gang was going to see that, because the gang is literally 10 feet away watching. And I think here too, they really, talk about the escalation, how unsafe schools are getting. This is pretty much like a scene right out of a prison movie, but it's just in a high school cafeteria. So I think this scene probably, like we were saying about other stuff in the movie, this scene probably was a lot more shocking at the time when the movie came out.
And when you make movies like this, like it fulfills a double, like there's a kind of dual audience thing going on where the adults watch it and believe like, oh my God, this is what's happening with the kids and it's scary and we need to keep in mind. And then the kids who are actually reliving this just find it hilarious, right? Because it's such an exaggeration of what high schools are really like.
So you here have the two kind of bullies of the gang. They start basically a barroom brawl in this cafeteria as a distraction. And then they get this new pledge to the gang, Vinny Cantillo, to go basically shank Michael Fox in the side. Mm-hmm. It's very, I don't know. It's very, like, I will say this is like one of the few moments where the violence like seems kind of real. And I think it's just because Michael Fox like sells it so good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, plus we as moviegoers are trained not to want to see Michael J. Fox get hurt.
Oh, exactly, and I think
we always feel protective of him.
Yeah, I think he's just such a baby face in this movie. Mm-hmm. You can't help but feel for him a little more.
Now, this is the point where I feel like, as a teacher myself, like it's escalated to this point. This is where Norris really needs to start figuring out a way to de-escalate this as quickly as he can.
Yeah, you kind of got to be the adult and.
Step in now and say, okay, this has gone too far, and instead it's just going to go more off the rails, obviously. But then again, I don't want him to do that because I want the rest of the movie to be badass, which it is. So
yeah, you want him to. Sorry, I had to mute myself to sneeze for a second. But yeah, you kind of want him to, as much as and that's kind of the duality of this film. Is the drama side is working good enough where you want there to be a peaceful resolution, but at the same time you want your exploitation payoff.
Yeah.
And again, like, this movie, especially like on this I'd say really the last two rewatches, I really got into it. And it just seems, just like how we talked about the little touches of like how Stegman actually did have talent and, some of the things like, the things with the animals, Roddy McDowall, and now this, I think it sells it well. Is like, not only do you have this violence escalation with the Mr. Norris character, but like it in very 3-4 scenes maybe, like you do get a good, clear, dramatic picture of how Roddy McDowall is melting down throughout this movie.
Mm-hmm. He has the gravitas to pull it off.
Yeah, here he is, literally being moved to tears, talking about how he's a failure and he can't teach anymore.
So I watched the show Riverdale, the kind of CW updated noir version of Archie, and I think it was Vulture or some website like that just recently did a really funny article where they did this expose and it's trying to figure out what temperature is it in Riverdale, because the clothes that the characters wear are just so inconsistent from scene to scene. They couldn't tell if it was like super warm or super cold there. And I was just reminded of that with this scene where I was thinking, what temperature is it supposed to be? Because they're outside having a barbecue outside. Norris is wearing like a light hoodie.
Yeah.
And Roddy McDowall's in this like super heavy like bomber coat. Like, why is he so cold?
The only thing I can figure out is they are next to like a big ass lake, so maybe the breeze,
His old brittle bones can't take it the way young, like fit Perry King can.
And he is becoming, at this point in the story, he's kind of pouring on the booze more and more. So, the blood thins, alcoholics get cold. Here's a good scene. You kind of just see, you get more of the joy that Perry King has in teaching the group. They're preparing for the competition, the rehearsing in the auditorium and stuff.
I will say, like you were talking about earlier about how much you like Perry King in this, and like, to if I can get on his nuts for a moment,
please do.
I'm actually surprised he wasn't a bigger star. I mean, really, because he's got, look at him here, and even like the beard, which was not well, beards are back in fashion now. I'm not sure what they were like in the early 80s, but he's just got like a really good look for film. Like he's got the leading man looks. He's got he's just got that kind of natural charisma and likability. I wish I could see like more stuff with him.
Yeah, and he did work, but like when I see him in this movie, I think this is a guy who's really on the rise. Instead of just kind of being a steady, kind of, I don't want to say middle of the road, but his career, like he worked, but not.
Yeah. Now here, of course, is the scene I was talking about. The scene that was recently all over the internet. Yes. Somewhere in a theater in 1982, a young Donald Trump watched this, and it stuck with him. And he said, "You know what? Someday, I think there's an idea here." Because we see a teacher armed with a gun holding his students hostage, essentially making them listen to his lecture at gunpoint.
Yeah. Roddy McDowell.
Of course, we've had a lot of recent national talk about the idea of arming teachers, which I'm not going to get off in a big tangent about, but as a teacher, I'll just give my 2 cents of it's a horrible idea, I believe. Yeah. And here we have a great example of why, because you never know when that teacher is going to, have a bad day.
Exactly. And not only that, but it's just, I mean, not to talk about real life stuff too much, but I kind of feel like it's some of these instances they have armed security who can't prevent it from happening. So why do you think a teacher is going to be any better? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and also, like I said, you don't want a SWAT team running in, not knowing who the person is that they're supposed to be, looking for.
So I got to ask you, because I actually was wondering about this when I was watching this the other day. You, as someone who's teaching, which let's be clear, you teach on the collegiate level, so you're not, in the, the day-to-day of teaching like really super young students, but still, I mean, as a professor, it's, like, does this movie, or is this a movie like this, does it mean any more to you now that you have that experience of, being a professor for a few years now?
I think it's maybe on a level I don't even think about that often, right? I'm sure, like I said, I came to this movie a little later anyways. But yeah, I certainly think it's true that if I watch this movie as a 17-year-old, I'd probably have a different point of view of it that I do as someone who's watching it from definitely sympathizing more with the teachers, and knowing what it's like to deal with problem students and just the stress of that job. And I don't want to even say, like you said, I teach on a collegiate level. I'm just a part-time teacher at a university. I don't feel like I'm nearly as stressed as public school teachers are.
Yeah.
Who are really, getting the shaft in that kind of world. But yeah, like I've thankfully I've never had a student like Stegman, or that kind of problem. So
I was gonna say, and it was believe it or not, a punk rock student. But when I was in college, I was taking some English courses. And it was early on I want to say, like, I had a couple semesters under my belt of school, but there was like a kid who was like a legit, like, freshman, like first semester freshman, and he was a punk rocker, and I talked to him a couple times, and it was English class, and he felt like the teacher got to him on the point where the teacher was berating him in the class because he refused to spell words correctly. Like, he wanted to spell school SKOOL, and like he just kept doing shit like that to the point where she literally kicked him out of the class. Like, I don't know what the wrap up of it was. He certainly was a menace as much as Stegman, but he openly had disdain for the teacher. And I just gotta say, on a collegiate level, I'd like, why would anybody do that? That's you're wasting your time, you're wasting your money. You know what I mean?
Well, that's actually, I'm very lenient with kids who want to, if they're creating a problem in the class that's distracting, of course you'll kick them out or whatever. But a student who just wants to do something like that, I just typically leave alone, because as you said, like, they're paying to be there and they're paying to get a bad grade at that point. It's not really my concern. But I would probably handle that a little better. I think, like, I'd have the advantage of I'd probably just try to bond with that kid. I'd be like, oh, you're into punk? Well, what do you think of the Slits? Or do you want to talk about the Dead Kennedys? And maybe I could connect to them.
Yeah. Me,
I'm the cool teacher.
You're the cool teacher. Miss Chakrabarty from India, who I loved. I thought she was a great professor. She's actually one of my favorite professors. But I guess she just wasn't having it. I guess she figured she came, English was her second language. She learned it well enough to teach. She was having no punk rock, rock and roll university bullshit in her classroom. But yeah, this was a great scene where Roddy McDowell basically was quizzing the kids at gunpoint. And finally, when a kid, I think it was Stegman, was about to get it wrong, it was a great tension of, is he really going to shoot them? Because he asked the other gang kids questions, and they actually got them right. And that was the whole point he was kind of trying to push, was they needed the gun to concentrate. And then, right at the moment, he was maybe about to kill Stegman. Norris tried to wrestle the gun away from him, and it went off and just shot into the ceiling. But I think it's hilarious, the wrap of that. Like, afterwards, like, the teacher and Norris are like, oh, we don't know what to do with him. Should we call the cops? And the principal was like, oh, all these parents will be after me if I do. And like, they literally just let him go home for the day.
Yeah, I have to, yeah. Is he going to come back the next day? Is that the idea?
Yeah, like that's was just like, in real life, obviously the police would come and a SWAT team, and he would be out in handcuffs. And here he is that night, proving that he wasn't giving up the ghost. He tries to actually, and this is like the only kind of scene I kind of have to call bullshit on in this movie, but he tries to run over the punk gang at the club that they hang out at. Like, how does he know where the punk gang hangs out? You know what I mean? It was actually some great stunt driving. According to Mark Lester, Roddy really was just trying to run everybody over, and they had to run out of the way, which I don't know how much of that I believe or don't believe. But also in the scene, Stegman has a jacket that's very much like Arnold's punk jacket from the first half of the Terminator. I don't know if you picked up on that, Trev.
Now you say it, yeah.
Very similar. I would have to look at the Terminator again to see if that jacket had the exact same studs that this one does, but it looks very similar. Roddy McDowall flipped his car over, and then it blew up. He died trying to kill the gang.
I definitely remember going to that record store that was kind of in the background there, the A&A Records.
Yeah,
I definitely remember going in there when I was there at Yonge Street, and actually just like a little down the street from that one, which I don't think you ever get a shot of it in this film, but was another really famous record store called Sam the Record Man. On the same street there, and they were kind of always competing against each other in Toronto, but they were both these awesome, just gigantic record stores.
Yeah, talk about something really missing out of our culture. And you think it would come back to some degree with vinyl having such
well, it depends. I think it depends on where you are. Like I live by a couple communities that are kind of more hipstery, and there are definitely some cool indie record stores kind of thriving a little bit right now. But yeah, not the chain ones for sure. We haven't seen come back in a big way.
Yeah. Do you remember? Are you young enough to remember this? Where stores would be like I'd say all the way up until the early 90s, even though they carried CDs as well, there'd be like a lot of stores that would be called like Blank and Blank's Records and Tapes. You ever remember that?
Yeah, I mean, just the kind of more standard indie ones.
Yeah, the smaller ones. The really major chain that I remember when I was a kid, and they had huge stores, and both with CDs, tapes, and records, even like up until pretty much a long time was we had a chain near us in Ohio called Coconuts. Did you have Coconuts where you lived, Trev?
I did not have Coconuts.
I think that's my only criticism of this movie was I think Roddy McDowall could have kind of, and I understand they're trying to up the stakes, but I think Roddy McDowall could have just exited the movie after that classroom thing. I don't think we really needed that whatever revenge beat or whatever when he's trying to kill the gang or whatever.
But then we wouldn't have the stunt of the car.
I know. That's kind of why the whole reason why it exists.
Yeah. Exploitation films need a moment like that.
They do. Here we go. We're getting back to Michael Fox in the hospital. He's still, he's been in rough shape. He's still in the hospital. I can't remember if it was his kidney or what got punctured by that knife.
It must have been something like that, because otherwise I don't see why it would still be there.
Yeah. But he won't make it in time. I think this is pretty much his last scene in the movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because he can't get out of the hospital in time for the big band recital. But he does a good scene. I remember he was asking, according to the girl that plays his friend in the movie, he asked her if she could get cash this check for him or cover for him, because he couldn't cash the check right away, and she said she couldn't because she didn't have enough money in her bank account. So Michael Fox was really, talk about living paycheck to paycheck, he couldn't even cash his paycheck at this time. Which is kind of the story that Tommy Wiseau uses in The Room, right? He says he has an out-of-state check or something he can't cash. He finally gives up the name of the guy who stabbed him. He wouldn't give them up for the drugs earlier, but I guess after getting stabbed, he said enough. Which then leads to even more frustration. Here they go, like half the gang's wearing Nazi symbols now, swastika. Mm. But yeah, now the gang is just in and out of the police station. You know, they can't do anything to them. I think that was probably the point of why they wanted a flunky like Vinny Cantillo in the first place, just to be the fall guy for them.
This cop even kind of reminds me of the cop from Death Wish, you know.
He does.
The one that ends up teaming up with them in Death Wish 2.
Yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about. He kind of, I mean, he don't have like the weird voice or anything, but he kind of reminds me of the weird cop that sometimes Emmett Walsh would play in like the 80s.
Yeah.
He'd always have like
well, he definitely has the Emmett Walsh haircut going.
Yeah, he does, with the sideburns and the weird little floppy old man haircut. It's a lot of economical scenes in and out. People going, couple lines of dialogue, getting out just to drive the plot forward. Mm-hmm. It seems like Mr. Norris is always coming and going where the gang is too. You notice that?
Yeah, it was just kind of kismet, right? This is just fate that these would be like kind of destined to go up against each other.
Yeah. Now, I don't think we really talked about her at all. This woman that plays Mr. Norris's wife, she kind of had double duty on this film, not only playing the wife who, later on has something really horrific happen to her, but she actually was like the executive producer and was responsible for bringing a lot of funding to the movie, which I thought was interesting because it's like, okay, I get it. Like, she was an actress as well, but like you help line up the financing for the movie. Now you're going to play a part in the movie. What part do you want to play? I wouldn't think it would want to be this part.
Well, maybe it was that she didn't want to put like another actress through that, or maybe they couldn't find an actress to do it, so she said, "Okay, I'll play that part." But
that could be. I never thought of it that way. If only Stegman and his gang could have. You could write in like a whole weekend kind of side story of Stedman and the gang ended up at the Dead End Drive-In.
Crossover.
Yeah.
Class of Dead End Drive-In.
Class of the Dead End Drive-In.
At this point, like, Stegman and his gang have pretty much won, so the fact that they're like still like pestering him this much just kind of surprises me. Like, know when to cut your loss and get out.
Yeah. Yeah, and that just is. Here we have some Stegman monologue about life is pain, pain is everything. You will learn to the teacher. And just how we were talking to about Perry King, this looking like this could have been like a star turn or whatever. I'd say the thing with for Tim Van Patten and Stegman, kind of surprised he didn't get some more roles and whatever.
Mm-hmm. Well, but if he didn't want to play this kind of role, maybe I wouldn't be surprised if after this he was offered a lot more parts like this. Right. And it's probably like, no, that's not what you want to get stereotyped as.
And there's that thing too, like a lot of actors. Some actors just ride the kind of B-movie train as long as they can. Others just rather give up than be stuck in it forever,
Mm-hmm. Now here we come to obviously the ugliest scene in the film, but no surprise to fans of exploitation cinema, as this was kind of just the standard in this genre at the time. Of course, we're discussing the rape scene.
Yeah. And I gotta be honest, like I don't mean to sound like a pussy here, but like whenever I'm like borderline on the fence about whether I want to sit down and watch this movie, like this scene always comes to my mind. Like I always kind of wish that it didn't have to go to this level, because they already killed his friend, Roddy McDowell. I mean, they didn't really kill him, but it was all the upmanship and the mania going on, and like this always feel like this is like, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think the film had to go to this level? And on top of it,
I don't know. I mean, I don't think most films that go to this level have to. I understand exploitation, and I'm not. I have an odd relationship with this kind of thing, right? Because I love a lot of exploitation films that deal with this as subject matter.
Right.
At the same point, I'm completely sympathetic for people who just don't want films to ever go here or don't want to see it. And even I've grown more uncomfortable with it as I've gotten older. I'm sure you have this too, where when I was younger and just got into exploitation film, I didn't bat an eye and didn't think twice about scenes like that in films. It's just like, oh, of course, that's what the bad guys do, because then you want to see the bad guys get punished. And now I see it as like how lazy it is, right? That just such an easy way to make them seem more reprehensible, and it always is. I don't know, the female characters who it's happening to are usually not given a lot of. They're pretty thinly drawn, other than to be the victim of this.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't think the movie needed to go here. I think you could have. I feel like just the death of Roddy McDowell or something else could have been the escalating point, or maybe like another attack on another student or something. But
because really, like, the inciting thing. And by the way, and another reason why it kind of bothers me, and I agree completely. Like, when I was a kid and I didn't really know what rape was, I would see it in movies and not think really anything of it. You know what I mean? But then when you get older and you start hearing, like, the context of the real life of how it's a traumatic event that affects people for the rest of their lives most of the time, like, then it's kind of just weird how it's so offhandedly put into movies. But also, too, like, this movie goes out of your way, and this is why it kind of double bothers me in this movie, is, like, this movie goes out of its way to let you know this woman is pregnant, like a couple months pregnant. Yeah. So it's like, then on top of it,
and the movie also kind of commits the to me kind of sin of using that kind of thing as shock value. Of, if you are going to put that into a film, you really got to explore what that means, you know? So, like, in a film like Irreversible or Elle, which is kind of about, you know, this horrible event and the fallout of it, okay, I can kind of go with you on it. But the problem here is that he never has a scene with his wife after this.
Right.
They just kind of come to the school and tell him something bad has happened, and that's kind of it, you know? And I don't know. I just feel like if you're not going to push it all the way on the storytelling level, then it's just lazy and doesn't need to be there.
Well, yeah, like, basically during the rape, the female of the gang, and that was another kind of level of sadisticness, is it seems like the female is just sitting there, like, laughing and taking pictures with a Polaroid camera, but they used the picture, you know, as a way to bait Mr. Norris out of the recital to go chase him, but really that's the reason why I say it's not so necessary is, like, it's really just the fact that they have his wife hostage, and he knows, like, how far they're willing to go already. You know what I mean? Like, just her being hostage. I mean, like, you could have her get punched, to get roughed up, whatever, and I feel like that would have been like literally enough to make him run out there. To be like, you know, I have to, like, literally save my wife, you know what I mean? Like, that's why I'm kind of just like the whole, and thankfully it's like, you know, it's not super short, and it's actually not even super graphic. It's just kind of the way the gang is acting is very disturbing, but yeah, it's just I don't know if they needed to take it to that level.
I'd say it's probably taken that level simply because, again, I think it's Lester indulging in his love of Clockwork Orange, and you know, that's what the gang's doing that. And I mean, even to the point where in that scene we suddenly see, you know, now the poster art we talked about, this is where it comes from, because there's an escalation in how outlandish their costumes are. And while they're raping her, the other gang members are putting on kind of like war paint and stuff. And so now they do look like this kind of more futuristic gang suddenly, obviously because they need to look cool for the climax. But it's also definitely wearing the Clockwork Orange influence on its, you know, shoulder a little bit more, or on its sleeve a little bit more here.
Yeah, and the female, the girl in the gang, she actually, this is like her even wearing her most stylish kind of leatherized outfit in the movie. So yeah, the guys are kind of wearing the same old shit that they wear, but
they've, like, painted themselves up. And...
yeah, they have, like, it's really like the adamant, like, Mad Max face paint kind of going on. I thought, you know, from an atmosphere level, once they kind of go into the bowels of the school here, where it's a lot of shadows and, you know, just streams of light coming in here and there, I thought all this played really great for, like, you know, how low budget the movie was and whatnot. I thought the cinematography really came through. Like, the whole movie shot pretty well, but I thought this stuff kind of popped and had more atmosphere than even the rest of the movie.
Yeah. Now, what do you think is their end game here? Like, is their intention to kill Norris and then do what with the wife? You know, like, that's...
Yeah, I mean, obviously the wife is bait to get him somewhere, you know? And, like, they never really go into it, but, I mean, I'm assuming because they picked this time, you know, I think it's just double to fuck up that recital as well. But yeah, like, I think definitely, I mean, they're definitely toying with them, but, like, obviously what they did with the wife and like what they're doing, even what they're just doing to him now, like there couldn't have been any aftermath of that. Like they would have had to literally kill both of them, or literally like they all would have, pretty much the whole gang would have went to jail. Like I don't care if they're juveniles or not. Like there definitely would have been consequences to this. Whereas like before, like they burned up his car, but it's like you can't really prove it. Whereas this is like you can prove it to the point that they even took a picture of what they did to his wife.
And gave him the picture.
Gave him the picture, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, not the smartest gang.
No. But clearly the the outrageousness, the ballsiness of the gang.
Well, here he is entering the Dario Argento gymnasium.
Yeah. This is where you practice basketball and Suspiria type witchcraft. But I thought this was some great set piece here with the gang guys swinging down the gym ropes. It's kind of got like a swashbuckling edge to it. And see, like all this really plays, I don't know, kind of actiony and over the top, and that's why, like compared to where something like Death Wish, which is just met with like brutal violence after all the raping and stuff. This kind of has a little more fisticuffs and fun and play to it. You know what I mean?
So this is Death Wish 2.
Pretty much. But yeah. But one thing I will say about this movie is I totally, when I watch this, even though these kids are older, I mean, they're clearly not high school age, they're clearly in their 20s and whatnot, I still felt like Mr. Norris probably could have beat the crap out of all of them. Just,
oh, yeah.
He's a good enough size, he's a good enough build. I mean, he's not, like, super buffed out or anything, but...
Maybe the tough one, like the built one, like, was that a challenge?
Yeah, because that dude, like, they do set him up like he knows how to fight more. But, like, one-on-one with Stegman, I always thought Mr. Norris...
He's got that, like, AC Slater thing going on where you're like, I don't remember high school kids ever being that jacked.
Yeah, like, I don't remember anybody having, like, clearly defined biceps like that in high school.
Hey, that's a doubled-up shot. They used that same shot earlier of the girl coming out and lifting her skirt.
Oh, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Such a shame. And I think it's funny that, like, Mr. Norris is literally fighting for his life in the bowels of the school, and we cut back to the recital, because, like, we need to know what's going on with this recital.
Yeah, it's an odd thing, right, where the movie thinks, like, this is, like, an important plot that needs to be resolved for us.
Yeah. Like, they almost should have, like, built it to where, like, that was, like, the competition, and, like, it was literally, like, are we going to win it with this performance? I guess they just wanted to tie it in with the payoff that's at the very end of the movie, but still, it's very tonally jarring when you watch it and it cuts back to this. Here we go. The girl, Michael J. Fox's friend, is now going to be the guest conductor.
Another film that's very much in this vein that this one reminds me of is another favorite of mine, which also deals with the ugliness of rape, but then goes into this kind of crazy high school gang warfare kind of elements, Savage Streets.
Oh, yeah. Like, I mean, not that it makes it any better, but at least that movie has a little more of a cartoony quality to it. Mm. Like, with Linnea Quigley aftermath of everything going on. No, it's... Here you have Mr. Norris picking up like a little tiny crowbar or something, but I have to say, even though I've seen this movie many times and I know the outcome, I'm always, like, every time I see it, there's almost like, how far is Mr. Norris really willing to go at this point? Like, you don't really know for sure at this point, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you say...
Well, this always works. I mean, I'm always a sucker for watching an ordinary man push to this point.
Yeah. And, that's what I say, like, especially in this age of kind of, a lot of movies are either about literally superheroes or just about people who are, like, really, extraordinary in one way or another. kind of think we miss in the, we should do more of these like everyday people pushed to like the brink of sanity type movies. Because
they can't even make a Die Hard movie anymore without McClane getting like hit by a van and just standing right up. So
I know. That's what I mean. Everybody's just too invincible in these movies now. You know what I mean? I find this interesting. I guess you're supposed to think it's maybe darker than what it looks like, but he literally throws this wrench over in the corner so the punk will go chase after it. But like, wouldn't the punk have seen the direction from which the wrench like went flying? Like it clearly.
Yeah, I don't think there's a moment in Class of 1999 that's like an even worse offender of that, where a character walks into a room and doesn't see another character when even the way it's framed, it's so clear that they should be in their field of vision. So
yeah,
I think just sometimes they're willing to cheat that a little bit. Yeah. But here we get like, so this moment when the first time I saw it, like I didn't know, because at this point you kind of have a sense of what the film is, and I didn't know the film was going to go like this kind of graphic,
right. Yeah, it's really like we said, like you don't know how far Mr. Norris is going to go, but you also really don't know how far this movie is going to go. Mm-hmm. From a gore level, a budget level. It's you can tell it's fake, but it's a pretty good effect here.
Yeah. No.
So they fight over the, the table circular saw there, and first he's fighting the kind of buffed up kind of jock guy of the gang, who's probably the best fighter. So they fight and they get on this table saw, which first Mr. Norris cuts his arm off, and then eventually he just throws his back onto it, which slices him all up. So, yeah.
Now, if I'm Norris, I'm feeling pretty good at this point because my first one-on-one fight was against that guy, and I won. Exactly. Now I feel like, the rest should be easy going at this point.
Oh, yeah, you could just snap that girl's neck compared to this guy. And the druggy guy, he's going to have a knife or something, but shit, he's nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah, I can take that guy, and I'm nothing special.
Yeah. The bigger guy, just because he's such a large guy, he could put his weight on you and push you around. You have to get the drop on him a little bit, but he's not like super tough or anything. Mm. Yeah. I will say one thing is, what do you think about this, Trev? Was I'm kind of, Stegman still has the wife hostage somewhere else, but the other members of the gang come in and see that other guy dead. They actually do have a legit, genuine, emotional response to the guy being dead. Like, that kind of surprised me. Like, I almost thought they would be, like, more cold and non-caring.
No, I think that's a nice, for whatever you might say about how crazy the movie is and the exploitation thing, I always think that's a nice character beat. And I always respect when films do that, when they say, like, bad guys might be bad guys, but they probably still like each other, right. And of course they're going to care when one of them is off, because this is their friend who they spend every moment of their waking life with.
Yeah. And they really get pissed off, like, we're going to get you now, Mr. Norris. But, if Mr. Norris could do that, they should be a little more careful here.
Yeah, definitely not split up like they just did.
Yeah, like Mr. Norris now, he doused the floor of the auto shop at the school with gasoline. He's got a blowtorch. He's about to light it up on the junkie guy standing right in the middle of the gasoline. I felt this was interesting because the junkie guy kind of waits for the flames to get there, don't he?
Yeah, well, that's the right guy to pull that trap on. He doesn't know any better.
Yeah, but I guess in a way or whatever, I just think it was probably in real life it probably would catch quicker than whatever they were really, because I don't think they were really using gasoline. They're probably using something else that burns. I thought this was actually a good, simple effect for when they show him all burned up. Like, his skin and stuff is pretty gnarly. Like, it's not quite Freddy Krueger level, but it's pretty crispy. Here, finally, Mr. Norris has to fight that big, heavyset guy. And I'll give him credit. Like, he's got a big wrench, and he's bashing the shit out of that guy. And, like, that guy don't give a shit at all. He actually does have that fat guy, invincibility going on.
God, this is so cathartic, though, right? This movie does do a great job of escalating to the point of, like, where this, it's horrible violence that you shouldn't be celebrating, but that's what these exploitation revenge films were great at. Like, you want to see this so bad. And it just feels, watching Norris just beat the crap out of him with a wrench just feels like so cathartic.
Now the girl jumps in a car to try to run Mr. Norris over, but not only does she hit this other car that's up on these like giant, it's raised up off the ground, which falls and kills the heavyset guy, but she kind of runs him over. Then she gets squashed too, so she's pretty much dying in the car too. But Mr.
Norris doesn't help by reaching in and violently jamming her neck over.
Yeah, I know. He doesn't give a shit. Although she does give up the location, and I always wonder if, like, she tells him that Stegman has his wife up on the roof, and I always wonder how much of that was, like, the plan and just, like, leading Norris into maybe a trap, or how much she just realized in her dying moments that, like, this wasn't worth it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I really like the dynamic of them adding a female into the group. I wish it, for whatever reason, could have been fleshed out a little more, like her character a little bit. But I guess there was, 5 people in the gang. We barely got any one-on-one time with Stegman. So
maybe when Lester makes class of 2999, he'll flesh out a little bit.
Yeah, I have to say he was teasing some of the whatevers for, the third film that he's going to make. I guess we'll go into it. There was Class of 1999, which was a completely different premise. It was very even more futuristic and sci-fi. That's the sequel. Then there was a Class of 1999 2, which was really just, it wasn't, I guess it's an official sequel, but it's just really kind of bullshit. Mm-hmm. And now he's trying to work on what should be like his third film in the trilogy, because he didn't make this one in Class of 1999. And he says the new one's going to take place in a private school. Which, I don't know. According to him, that's the only way he could tell the story now, because the private school will be willing to cover up crimes or what have you. But I don't even know if I really believe that much.
I feel like honestly, with everything that's been happening with school shootings and like the response to it, and Trump talking about arming the teachers, I just feel like now would be a good time to revisit like this kind of territory.
Right.
And I actually feel like Lester could probably get that made at this point because of how relevant that seems.
So here we finally have the catharsis of, Stegman did slash the wife across the chest, but now we have the catharsis of Mr. Norris just literally just beating the shit out of Stegman. And Stegman really wasn't, he didn't put up much of a fight. He got his ass whipped there, which was great. But now he's hanging, like he fell through a skylight, now he's hanging for his life. And this was like, they had to like reshoot this just a little bit and trim it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you heard about that, Trev?
Yeah, so originally, right, it wasn't just that Stegman fell, and they wanted, the audience wanted, like, Norris to actually be the one who kind of gets the killing blow on him.
Yeah, well, originally Stegman literally, like, let himself go as, like, a fuck you to Mr. Norris, to be like, I'll kill myself, like, but they're saying no, like, the distributors or whoever were like, no, Mr. Norris has to do it. So they filmed this one little shot where he kind of punches towards the camera, meaning that, he literally made Stegman fall, which I actually do think that was the right move. Because, like all the torment that the gang does, and Stegman falls, and somehow these, like, ropes got wrapped around his neck, so he literally gets hung in front of the entire school. And it's a great stunt. I don't know who really did it. It doesn't look like a dummy, but Van Patten, then we get a shot of him, like, with his eyes disturbingly kind of open still. Almost like he's kind of winking. I think it's a good wrap-up. And I think you do even more than others. I think even more than Straw Dogs. Like, Straw Dogs is a very good movie, but I don't really feel the catharsis at the end. Here we have the aftercrawl says Andy Norris was not prosecuted because the police could not find anyone who actually saw it happen, which is like a play on like what the police were always telling him. Well, if nobody sees it happen, which I think that's just bizarre. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that last credit, that last text is really strange. Like, why it needs to be there?
Yeah, it's I don't know.
I thought it'd be even funnier if, like, to me, I think the better ending would have been cutting to like the next day or like the next week, and everyone's back in music class. And they're sitting there waiting, and he walks in just all bandaged up and everything, and he's just like, "Whew, that was something, huh? All right, let's get back to work."
Yeah,
I think that's the.
I think that actually would be a good ending.
Yeah.
Like you come back to school and like the kids are all whatever, and maybe even Michael J. Fox has returned to school and he's like, joking around like, hey, I'm okay and shit. But like, yeah, and then Mr. Norris comes in because there really is that element of like a good teacher coming to a shitty school, that got so like with all the Dangerous Minds and the Stand and Delivers and like all those, all those kind of cliche.
The Principal, another one of my favorites.
Yeah, The Principal. I thought that a lot last time I was watching this. I was really like, how much was The Principal really modeled after this?
I'm pretty sure I watched an interview with Lester where he flat out called it like a ripoff.
Really?
Yeah.
Because you just never know. There's. I mean, obviously, a lot of these ideas are similar and whatnot. You don't know people who made this movie, did they see this other one or not? But yeah, I was thinking that a lot when I was watching this. But yeah, class of 1984. Should we tease the sequel a little bit?
I think so. So our idea for doing this was to do a kind of like a double feature kind of idea. So we're going to also tackle the sequel, which, as you already alluded to, is quite different. I mean, it's a thematic sequel, I guess.
Yeah.
Lester certainly calls it a sequel, but I think they're definitely just two standalone films. It even changes the idea of who's the sympathetic, like character in terms of this time you're rooting for the students against the teachers, for reasons I guess we don't need to spoil it yet, but it's definitely takes it in a more sci-fi bent.
Very sci-fi, and like we said, it would be very easy for, maybe even somebody who saw both movies over the years and just, it'd be very easy for you not to even know that it's a sequel to this one. So, I mean, like I see a lot of podcasts, like, they do like a series of films back to back to back, and then they talk about how like all our downloads went in the shitter or whatever. So I'm not really worried about that in this case because these are very different films. It's not, and like I think, but like this movie, like whereas I think we're going to be talking, a lot about with Class of '99. It's great because it's so over the top and fun and just like a blast. I think this movie, every time I watch it, it kind of surprises me, how well the drama works for it. And I think a lot of that, like we said, had to do with, the teacher character. And obviously Stegman was good, too. He brought it to life.
It is really good. I mean, it's a great, like, kind of exploitation version of Blackboard Jungle. It's got all those elements. And, yeah, you're right. Like, the drama works, the action works, the performances are fun. It's not to say... I feel like I say this for every movie we watch, where I say I wish it was, like, a bigger deal than it is.
Yeah.
And actually... I don't feel like this one is that underappreciated. I definitely think this does have a pretty decent cult following, but I'm surprised it isn't just a little bit larger, and it feels like something that could be a little bit more revisited.
Yeah. It's, unlike some things which are very, clearly somebody, knew that this had a little bit of a cachet to it because it was released on DVD about 10 years ago. In a special edition, and then they did an even bigger special edition for, I guess, Scream Factory about 2 years ago, I want to say it came out. Yeah. So I mean, it's definitely appreciated to some degree. But yeah, like we said, I don't know. I guess that's what really this show is about, though, is by saying, hey, we remember.
Yeah.
So that's it, pretty much. I know there's a lot of upheaval and stuff in the world of the X-Men, and you actually do an X-Men podcast right now. Well, you've been doing it for years, but you want to throw out there to the listeners what's been going on Days of Future podcasts examining the X-Men recently?
Recently, we just did our big March Mutant Madness episode where we kind of pitted, we replicated the March Madness idea of pitted 64 different X-Men characters against each other in a randomly, like the matchups are randomly selected to determine the greatest X-Men character with some different criteria. That was a really fun one, a double-sized episode. And coming up, we'll be discussing the recent Deadpool 2 trailer, talking about all the upheaval in terms of Fox seemingly not knowing what the hell they're doing with the future X-Men movies. And, of course, right around the corner, we've got Deadpool 2, and we will be, of course, reviewing that, giving all our thoughts on that film.
So a lot of shit going on right now in the world of X-Men. Maybe a little too active, I'd say.
Well, too active unless you love bad news.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. But thankfully here on the Graveyard, we can pick and choose our battles. We don't have to take any bad news. We can just comfort ourselves with our nostalgia for these movies. So anyway, this is definitely a movie I love. I did a long review of it on Vami with Corey. I did a review of it, of the DVD version, for Hillbilly DVD Reviews YouTube channel. And now finally I got to sit down and do a full-length commentary on it. So I want to say thank you for kind of bringing this suggestion to the table, Trev. And I'm sure the next time around, we'll be doing Class of 99. And I'm really interested in... that's actually a movie I rented a bunch of times. I want to say, I know at least 2 times, maybe a third time. And yeah, it's definitely a movie for the ages, so to speak. Like, in my mind, in some ways, I think it belongs in that elite class of films like Evil Dead 2, wouldn't you say?
I do. I'm sure I'll say this again when we do the episode, but if you want me to tease like the episode for anyone who, doesn't really know Class of 99, maybe as much as this one is wondering why to bother going and tracking it down before they listen to us or whatever. It's a film that I just recently was introduced to. I was aware of it, but I just never sat down and watched it. And it really was one of those cases where you sit down and watch something, and while you're watching it, you realize, like, oh my God, I'm watching one of these movies. It's like one of my all-time favorites now.
Yeah.
And that's not to say it's like one of the best movies I've ever seen, but like you said, it's one of those movies where, like, if you have a certain kind of mindset and if you're into a certain kind of film, everything about it is kind of perfect, right? Like it's just such a blast. And I intend to spend the rest of my days introducing it to as many people as possible and saying, well, if you haven't seen this, you need to. It's a great B movie.
It really
in a way that, like, I mean, I think it's more fun than the Class of '84, although '84 is definitely the better film. But they do make a cool 1-2 punch, especially because they're so different.
And they're actually, like, it's that thing of, like, you could actually watch these films back to back as a double feature with your buddies on a Friday night, and it's really not going to seem that repetitive because, like we said, it goes off in different directions.
It's actually a perfect double feature because, the thing about double features is usually the second movie people kind of pay a little less attention to anyways.
Yeah.
And so Class of '84, which has the more dramatic story in which you want the attention, that's where people are going to be. And then 99 is just batshit insane and ends the night on a high because it's just so ridiculous. And it definitely will pull the people in. And I can't imagine not, cheering by the end with the climax of 99.
Exactly. And I don't know why, because I've done a few reviews on YouTube and some things where I've actually been contacted or had it retweeted or whatever by people involved with these movies. I have a weird sneaking suspicion that us covering this in 99, I have a feeling we might be getting some correspondence from Mr. Mark L. Lester. I think he's out there really taking the pulse, getting ready. So Mark L. Lester, if you want to email us at 1980smoviegraveyard@gmail.com, and we'd be more than happy to read your comments on a future episode or whatever.
Yeah, and I'll just come in and say then we love you. I mean,
we love you. We want you to make more.
I love this movie. 99 is now one of my favorites. So yeah,
I love Commando as well. I just bought Firestarter on Blu-ray a couple weeks ago. I was watching all those special features. So.
Armed and Dangerous.
Yeah, Armed and Dangerous. I still remember seeing Armed and Dangerous in the theater. So we definitely appreciate your film. So yeah, Mark L. Lester, please keep them coming.
Heck, I've even got a little soft spot for Pterodactyl starring Coolio.
I haven't seen that one. I'll have to track that down to complete my Mark L. Lester filmography experience.
No, that's not going to complete it. He's got a lot of movies.
Okay. But... So everybody, thanks again for going down memory lane with us, and just really taking a look back at this futuristic shock value film that in the rear view still has a lot to be appreciated about it. Trev, I want to thank you again for obviously being a grave digger here and also bringing the Class of series to the table. All right, everybody, thanks a lot, and we'll be seeing you soon in the night. Well, I was going to say the 1980s movie graveyard, but it's just the movie graveyard.
Yeah.
All right, later.